the journey of knowing about how the startups grow and how they develop, I think the stories in and around the university tell me that even NIT's journey wasn't like a bed of roses. And I believe there's no one better to tell us about the hardship faced while building and growing the university than our beloved founders. So I would like to request our founders to share about the jolly days when they decided to start the NIT. Over to you, sirs.
Uh, you want us to tell you the NIT story?
Yes, sir. The success story. I'd like to hear that.
To inform the next of your kin, you may not be home for next 3-4 days.
If you are up for the day to hear and learn.
I think it's easy to talk about the story, and one reason many times people asked us, why did you not write a book on it? And our answer is that in that case, the history would have got frozen. In other words, every time we tell a story, it comes out differently.
And even the perspective that keeps on adding on to the story.
Facts remain the same, but I think why and how changes. So I think best will be if we get into a conversational mode. You can ask us questions. Then maybe I will trigger off. Raji will trigger off. Whatever.
He already asked a question. Probably you can help him out because he is trying to solve exactly a problem which you are very successful at solving in terms of building a offline, and he's trying to do that hybrid centers where offline part is a very essential element. So, if some tips and struggles that you faced in your growth phase, in your starting off, then in your growth phase, if you can share those, probably be more than happy.
I think you should talk about your struggles. Success, everybody knows. I think you should talk about your struggles,
Where you really got stuck.
your insights, where you got stuck, how did you move out of that
it? And you started in 81, I read, and then 7-8 years, you made only 8 or 9 centers. Today, we are all in a rush. Like he said, it's been a long time, which is 6 years. You are in it for 41 years.
Yeah.
And then suddenly pivoting. So it will be very nice to understand how that happens.
Better storyteller.
So can I add one more layer to it? It's the franchise model, because that's today none of them are franchise. Right? The franchise model is something very powerful which came.
Yeah,
That was the real scale. I'm sure you will also agree.
And one more beauty is about the standardization of delivery mechanism.
Correct.
From printed books.
Yeah.
Correct.
Those days we only used to have the Tata McGrail and all, but NIT book you could actually use a Xerox and sell that also. Companies.
You must have done that.
Okay, so I think there are a few things you take for granted which did not exist at that time. Most important, funding. Okay, you take for granted there was venture capital. There was nothing called venture capital, right? So when we talk, whenever I think of the times where it was time to put a lock and get on with life, this was one such instance. So obviously at that time the only thing which was available was bank debt, fortunately we came from organizations and had little credibility somewhere. At least the bank manager would be wanting to listen to us, but after listening to us would say thanks but no thanks. The reason was at that time funding was only available to companies which had plant machinery, or if you had something to hypothecate or something to mortgage or something which we had not. And in any case, I think through one twist of fate, and should I say somebody stuck his neck out and approved a loan, which actually started the beginning of, because behind that loan was the most expensive part was the computer, right, at that time. So, loan got approved. But just as the loan got approved and the company started, the RBI came up with a credit freeze and said only mission critical manufacturing industries will get loan, and ordinary banks can't do that. Refinancing institutions can refinance some loan like that. So before we started, the story was ending. Not that we didn't have backups of some kind or the other, but keep the backups aside. As luck would have it, we started in Nariman Point in Bombay. That's the first center was at Nariman Point, Bombay. It's an interesting location in an office building, prime office building.
Most expensive place
most
in
expensive place in Bombay. And
Most expensive place in Bombay. And the reason was nobody was willing to give us a place on rent either. Because what would we give? Because those were the days of Pagdi. And, you had to give a huge deposit. And we didn't have access to that. But then somebody stuck their neck out and said, look, they look good, and we got a place to operate. So in the same building downstairs was IDBI. IDBI, the development bank. So the executive director of IDBI and I knew each other from my past association. As a young engineer who was there, he asked me once, "So what are you doing?" We said, "We're trying to do this." I said, "Okay." And then another time I met him, I told him, "Look, we have this, we had a loan, and that loan has not got stopped. So what do we do?" So he said, "Come along to my office." So I went with him, and he said, "Sorry, we can only give it to a manufacturing company. If you can prove it to me, you are a manufacturing company, I can make sure that IDBI will refinance." So I thought very hard. Those days, the only way to speak, Rajiv was in Delhi, I was in Book calls and wait for you realize
the operator to follow.
if it is a demand call.
Correct.
And so anyway, we could not speak to each other. Then I thought we have to find a solution. But in the night, the idea came to my mind, and I broached it with him. I said, as a manufacturing industry, you have raw material, correct? And then you have a machine, and then you have a finished product. Our raw material is a student, an individual who does not know computers. Machine is the computer we have. And our output is a finished product who can get a job, who knows computers. So doesn't that qualify? He says, theoretically, yes, but I wish there was something physical attached with it. I said, yes, he has printouts of his project. He said, that can work. That's how we got our first loan.
Oh,
But we didn't realize that in this process, we had actually opened doors to many entrepreneurs who were not in business of education. But if you remember, there used to be data processing centers.
Yeah. Yes.
Those guys had the same problem. But they were actually getting raw data, processing and producing reports for people. So they could get their computers financed also. So in many ways, it helped not only us, but I think many others. That's a story, one story I remember. We were very clear from the very beginning that we can't train everybody. We cannot. We never assumed or took responsibility for the fact, because we truly believe the person who's in those days paying 1,500 rupees to do our course, if the course outcomes are not fulfilled, then we don't deserve to have that. That's why Rajiv was talking about the first Shippy who came on shore leave, started our course, midway had to go back to see. We traced him 6 years later and got him to do his course and all that. Of course, that was the early days, but after that, when numbers increased, I am not sure whether we did that to all 100%, but the effort definitely was. fact, when we closed down all the centers about in COVID, there were 26,000 students on rolls. We traced every single student. Even today, 272 students have not been traced. We traced every one of them and completed their course because they had all joined by putting their faith on something called NIIT. It was our responsibility. So that 272 number is still in my head because we are not able to trace them. We've written letters, done whatever, even sent legal papers. Why would a guy get a legal notice for not completing the course? To whatever we could do. So that was a very, very important thing that we believe that our services our earning is complete only after we have delivered the outcome. And the outcome could be a job, outcome could be whatever the course was meant for. When we started, there were no trainers. And our model was that practitioners have to be trainers. And practitioners is what we were trying to produce. So it was becoming difficult to find expertise. In fact, we used the term multimedia in 1982, which at that time meant multiple media, which was, we had video recorded courses, which we used to get from a company which is finally morphed into Skillsoft. If you know what Skillsoft is. Any Skillsoft course you do most probably would have been developed by us now later. Because after 1993 or 94, we started by using their courses in our delivery process, but ended by being the only provider of building their courses, their own courses.
Computer-based software.
And that was computer-based e-learning. So it was a very interesting thing because the courses had American accent. There were no video recorders in the country. So 1982 Asian Games happened. That's the first time a color TV came to India. Using color TV from December of 1981 because we bought our first color TV from an outgoing American consulate guy who was going back home. So he had a video recorder and a color TV. So we bought that. And by the time we got the delivery at 11:30 in the night from that guy, we came back to our center. Next morning, 7:30 in the morning was our first class. Right? And this TV and this 20 kilogram TV and the 10 kilogram VCR had to go up. They were heavy stuff. They were studio quality stuff. Had to go up. So there were two of us. And one carried the TV on his head and the other carried the VCR on his head. And
That's an exaggeration.
6 floors.
Yeah, we had
But the class ran.
guys.
But the class ran.
Another IIT guy. MJ was there at that time. Yeah.
And the night before the center was to open, we had hired 4 people from IIM Ahmedabad. That was Raji at his ultimate. He did campus interviews in IIM Ahmedabad, not in the campus interview process. He went to the mess in the previous night and got 4 people who got the idea of being with NIIT. And one night before we were to open the center, 4 guys landed up. Carpenters, painters, and various things happening. And I asked them, who are you? They said, well, we are joining NIIT. We just came to see where the office is. I said, very good. Welcome to NIIT. Here is the broom. Please get going. The work has just started. So the IIM MBAs started their job by cleaning the office. But I think that's also what created the bond, that positional bond. I think of those four, at least three. I would say fourth guy is not. I've not been in touch with him, but we are in touch with them. They did many things. Many of them lasted long times, 20, 30 years in NIIT, and after that went on and did other things. I mean, like that, there are stories, and now you want to talk about franchising. Okay. Now, franchising is a very important element, and we learned a lot in that process. So, the lesson one in franchising is not a shortcut to solve your funding problem, because you can't pay for, in those days, infrastructure. So, let somebody else bring his infrastructure. Our learning was that if you do not have a successful business model which can sustainably deliver revenue and profits, you have no right to franchise. You have no right to franchise, especially if your requirement is that you want to get first generation entrepreneurs. Our requirement was education is a large time constant business. We heard it today, you need to be patient, right? We heard it today a couple of times. Yeah, you have to be patient. So, and the desire or to do shortcuts and get away with it in short term is very, very strong. The temptation is very, very strong. But if you succumb to that temptation, the end is also very, very clear. And there is the EdTech graveyard. All the stories, if you see wherever they have failed, is most common feature is this, that they went for a shortcut and then they could not manage. So our thing was, if you go to in quotes, a normal dealer distributor, which is what, right? That guy is putting his money. If he's putting his money, he deserves a return. He will, to get his return, he'll do whatever it takes. For him, getting a return on that money is important. But our logic was that if you are a first generation entrepreneur, if we take on a guy who's becoming an entrepreneur for the first time, and you build this, you put this in his mind, that money is not going to come the way it is. But yes, eventually you will do very well. If you can prove that. And how can you prove that without showing him something? Not just by faith and trust. If you can do that, then you will get very good quality entrepreneurs. We used to have 7 rounds of interview before the person was taken as a franchise. 7 rounds. I mean, in those 7 rounds, some of them had propped themselves without thinking, what the hell, what are we here for? I'm not appearing for an interview. But it was something like that, because that compatibility was very important. See, competence we can give you because that's the business we are in. But compatibility is something that you have to come ready with. I mean, I can't change your attitudes very late in your life, right? So we used to do a lot of that. So statement 1, you need a sustainable business or sustained business which has demonstrated, then only you have a right to franchise. Second, you have to franchise it to a like-minded person who has the same patience that you have to demonstrate as a part of this business. If you are in for a long term, you will go very long. Third, you have to have confidence that after I have parted with my money, you will part with some money. And we never believed that you should part with all your money. We always believe that we will share the risk with you. But yes, you have to put something up front. There has to be a skin in the game. That skin, we eventually also worked out with banks that all that you had to do was your selection letter as a franchisee, and any bank would give you a loan. Any bank happily be able to give you a loan as long as you meet the other requirements, whatever those requirements. But in the beginning, that was not the case. And they were all first generation entrepreneurs. They did not come with capital rich. So we had to have a low starting investment. We had to have like-mindedness, have their full attention. Not that I have my job and then in the afternoon I will come and then in the evening I'll do something else. No. You are 100%. Last, you are exclusive. You either work with NIIT or you don't.
May I ask, sir, if it was the year 1994, what was the kind of franchise amount you used to take that time? I have another thing to add on to this.
I
1994.
would say in 1990, mid-90s,
94 exactly, if I say.
94 particularly. You would pay to NIIT maybe about 3 lakhs.
So this is where when I passed out my engineering. So I was from a visual background at first. So we had a choice to take this NIIT franchise, and then Pentasoft was also there, which was a competitor. But somehow, so I was just recalling, your story with the founders and how as a franchise thing, it came to our family and we evaluated, but somehow we could not go in that. So is the reason I was asking. 3 lakh rupees in 1994 it was an amount for people.
What would be around 1 CR?
No, not 1 CR exactly, but yes, 30, 40 lakh rupees, 50 lakh rupees in today's.
No,
If you say
not
94.
total investment. Why? Because you would take premises on rent,
Yeah.
furnished,
Yeah,
buy computers.
that's true.
Yeah. So your total cost of project was 30 lakhs.
Yeah.
But our business model was built in a manner that you will break even in first year. You will break even in first year and you had a 3-year term, franchisee term, and 3 year you will go back with 30% return. And we'll work with you to make sure that happens. So we used to tune the model based on and the capacity, and there was a science built around it of how we would assess what the market would be like. It's not that we were 100% of the time correct, but we were more correct than wrong, massively more correct than wrong, I should say. Maybe there were 5-10% failure cases. Most of the time they succeeded. The fourth thing was, so first I said you have to be, we have to have a running, profitable business before you can franchise. Second, you have to take a like-minded entrepreneur. We preferred first generation. I would still say that. Well-educated, good family values. Our franchising was on smaller cities. So it made, for example, a guy who had a career, I'm giving you, let's say you were a software engineer and you came back to India and you didn't know what to do and you were from Nagpur, just using an example, right? Now you are an unknown entity in Nagpur, but suddenly now you are a very well-known entity because all the family's kids come to you for, so you also build a social status for them. So you work in a bank somewhere and you came back to your city. So it contributed quite a bit in that. That positioning helped. Then we would build very strong relationships with colleges. So one of the jobs of the franchisee was also to keep building those relationships and nurture those relationships. Then your ability to be able to hire and retain people. On an average, if you see a room full of NIITians, you would see about 10 to 15 years in NIIT. So people stay with NIIT for long periods of time. Many times, some people scoff on the fact that you have, but I think getting the right mix of experience and newness, I think, are both important ingredients.
And what was the thought behind having a first generation entrepreneur was your first choice? Why?
I told you, if you are a hardcore businessman, you will ask yourself, if I put my money in stock market, I'll make 15%. Why do I have to wait for 3 years? You'll ask those questions, doesn't it? Whereas if you are a first generation entrepreneur, for you, it is very important that you succeed. You also know that your friends, they start businesses, and if you are assured that you are likely to break even in first year, the investment that you have, you'll feel comforted. Number three, the first generation entrepreneur is malleable in his thinking. The other guy has already tasted all the wrong things in life and therefore doesn't hesitate to do something in case the need arises. So there were many takeaways, some intended, some unintended. I'm not saying everything was well thought of. There was a lot. And then we would spend a lot of time. We would do boot camps and we had a residential facility used to call SEED, School for Employee Education and Development. And about 30 odd rooms, a full building, and people were, it was mandatory for every NIITian and therefore to our franchise, every one of their employees to come and do a 1 week, at least 1 week a year there. So that not only meant that you got the currency of skill, you also got the value systems of NIIT imbibed in you. So
every employee of every franchisee was finally selected pass.
yeah, everybody, every single guy was hired, trained, certified internally, and then could. Because the important thing was the responsibility we were carrying on our head was that somebody has left his kid with us. Right? And now it's our job to make sure that we deliver the end result. Then there were ups and downs in everybody's life, right? So then NIIT had to be the big brother at that time. There were times when they would run out of cash flows because of external situation. We would bail out, we will use our bank limits to get them funded and make sure that their operations grow. Even when we closed down our centers, we made sure that every franchisee also had some continuity in his life. In many cases, we allowed them to continue with the franchise without paying for a few quarters after that. To make sure that goodwill that we
Residue
enjoyed.
that left after
That brand, yeah. So was this YTK bug that time happened in 2000 had impact on your business model also?
Beg your pardon?
Y2K bug when it was the year
.com bust. .com bust or
No, after Y2K. The 2000.
That is,
Yeah.
the .com bust happened after Y2K. So .com bust is the time when one fine morning our centers went dry for a while. But then the idea was to service all the students, make sure. We had to make sure our franchises service all the students. We were very sure that this too shall pass and therefore they have to keep their lights on. They have to keep their salaries. We did multiple things. We opened funding schemes for them. Everybody participated in the innovative way. We increased awareness of computers. Suddenly, computers were not good value. I don't know whether any one of you know that World Computer Literacy Day. You know, there are days in the year which are called whatever, Father's Day, Mother's Day and all that, right? But there is one World Computer Literacy Day that belongs to NIIT. And that,
December someday.
2nd of December is World Computer Literacy Day. And the first World Computer Literacy Day, our first student first student will not be the most correct thing to say, but the first recipient of that was Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who happened to be the Prime Minister. And who said that please come and teach all the members of Parliament. So we actually conducted a training program in Lok Sabha, in the House of Parliament, for all the members of Parliament. This was to revive people's interest and confidence in computers, amongst other things. There were many objectives of this, but one thing which it did was, well, computers are actually good, they're not bad. All those jobs which went away and flew away and all that. So I think those were some of
The most important thing that I take away from this story is that you build that entire organization on a set of values. Yeah. How did you guys arrive at these values?
So 7 people sat for 6 months and wrote coincidentally 272 words on a piece of paper. We still practice that. We still use that. It's stuck on the walls. That's very true. But we talk about them when a person joins. We talk about them when a person is interviewed. We talk about them when. So, for example, when we went overseas, these value systems we had imbibed very well. But I went to US for 4 years. Nobody cared. They didn't care who, and we are nearly 40 Americans in that office. So I found them coming and going at all points of time. So I used to keep thinking, I mean, there are no Americans in this room, right? I realized that actually what Americans can't resist is free food. You'll be surprised.
From college days.
I don't know where it is from. I put one notice saying, challenge the value system. Pizza and Coke on the house. Friday afternoons. On an average, 30 people used to land up. It takes half an hour to eat a pizza. Thereabouts. And in Atlanta, you can only have a Coke. It's a Coke city. Right? So then they started understanding what value systems meant. Even today, some of those Americans who afterwards left, did other things, their personal bonds with the community, the NIIT community, are very, very strong. So I think that was a very important, as you rightly said, very important. And that takes a lot of friction away. A lot of organizational friction when you scale up is not of the fundamentals on which you build the organization. You are actually perpetually trying these friction issues and solving these friction issues most of the time. I think those are.
We have another 20 minutes.
You can ask some more questions.
I'll just come to a few points which may be answers to potential questions. So there are 6 points I want to make very briefly. One is that education is a business of passion. Talked about it, but be very clear. And we've been asked, why did we ask the question, why did it continue? So used to be asked the question, why are you doing this? Because you have logical answer, then it took a long, long time to articulate it the way which resonates with us. And that is that it gives us joy to see people grow. That's the essence. That is the essence. And most of the people who stayed with us for a long time love to be involved because they get joy. Second thing is that with passion, you have to put process. So we were earliest ones to do ISO, we were earliest ones to do all those standards. Not because it was fashionable, but because we realized that if you have to expand, then we have to replicate what we do. For a manufacturing system, you get equipment A, B, C, D, and that process goes. And the worker hangs around there to make sure the meters are okay or whatever. In our case, we were dealing with, as they said, the raw material coming in, finished good going out. That's the focus. So we had to make sure that as we start the second and the third setup, while we're still running them, and then particularly as we started looking at the idea of expansion, that we had to have a process in everything. So we did extensive work to document everything and then did the ISO standard where there's a process for a process and so on and so forth. But one revelation 10, 15 years down was that passion and process are antithetic. And too much process can start disturbing passion. And too much passion can start disturbing process. So you have to get that fine balance. Absolutely have to get it. Don't let the process get the better of you, but there were times when it did. We saw we're getting bureaucratic. And innovation will get. So this balance is maintained, and we have a tradition every year of doing what we call the annual day. We started in 1989. Get everybody in the city together and spend a whole day. Now we spend half a day talking about what happened, all the highlights, all the recognitions, and then what are we going forward with it, whatever. So we realized that communicating, connecting with people, and doing this discussion on what are we really chasing, that intense engagement to revive and keep the passion in place. That was one of the important processes. Now, the interesting thing is that people leave NIIT, we don't call them ex-NIIT. They call it forever NIIT. And 22nd of June, Vijay, Raju, me, Arvind, four of us have been called by the Bangalore crowd. I think about 200-300 people get together. All age groups. They still are as bonded as they were here. And we had done an event here before COVID where we had some 500 people who came. That we wanted to do it every year. So that bond is on these values. And the fact that we had process, we had to work on making sure that process liberate rather than constrain. So delegation on an agreed method is possible. So that's the second point. The process and passion, both are necessary. Third is the question of regulation. So any business which is regulated, whether it's banking or it's telecom or insurance, as a regulator, who has to make sure people follow rules. And in many of these places, the regulators are very highly competent people. In education, it's not so. It's not so. Most of them are outdated or they don't understand business. So, regulation in education is very complex. Most regulation is built when someone does something wrong and they want to stop that. So, regulation is built to choke, not to provoke. And there is disproportionate power in the hands of regulators. Which is why it becomes very tricky. Question that you asked. Education is degree giving education or school education is a not-for-profit business by law. The question which comes up is that if you look at how many people, and education particularly is nothing is allowed. Higher education, when you go to higher and higher level, then the individual has the capability to make a decision. And if you look at an MBA program, look at an ISB, there I think the government says your customer is not within a quotes a gullible student. There's a term called gullible student in the history of regulation. That all these sharks are sitting there to make the gullible student. And then as you go into lower and lower stages, education is very difficult to define. So school education, every country tries to protect as though their life depends on it for good reason. And therefore you can't play around. So Delhi, if you stay in Delhi, the Department of Education Delhi keep beating up all the school people. Why are you raising fees? We give you land free. So they have too many levers. And if either disinterested or corrupt individuals have that power. In higher education, we also have a complexity. We have AICT, UGC, we have state government, it's a concurrent subject. And in many ways, the NEP is a way to help us unshackle, except in the NEP was announced in 2020 and the rules are only coming out now. So people are interpreting NEP the way they want, which is in some ways good. But the regulator can come back on each of these sentences you violated. So you have to be very mindful of this part because that can stop your business. They will say till further notice, please stop enrollments. Some simple line will come like. So regulation, please understand it well, and we've stayed on the safer side. Fourth point, there was this question of product market fit. And I think, remember that till you reach there, you're spending your own money. And therefore, be very mindful. Reach that point and try and understand. We talked about it now. Really is your customer. What do they really want? And what are you giving? And what you think you are giving is what they think they're receiving or not. So we've heard, I think, good examples of experimentation that has to be done. So once you reach there, then you're a project that can be funded more comfortably. But there are forms of angels and so on. People take a bigger risk and so on, but that's different. But you have to reach that point. Fifth is the whole business of make or buy or partner. I think it's an important thing to recognize, because particularly when we are seeing arrangements between entities of different sorts, a university with someone, somebody who's, or even between companies, the more specialized the thing is getting, the more the need and opportunity to partner. And partnering models can be that you contract, or you get someone to put an equity and be involved in a board, or you just become part of something else. So, acquiring and exiting in your journey should be a factor which is not an emotional factor. We have done how many acquisitions? 25? What's the number?
7.
Including what?
Both.
Not substantial, including the US.
Yeah.
Small.
Well, yeah.
When you're small, you do something small. Now it looks small in retrospect, but
Yeah.
count all of that, the number is quite big. And we have also shut some businesses. I give one or two examples, because the regulator was being unreasonable, or the governments were being unreasonable in some government contracts. For us, government has been a terrible buyer. I have to say within this room, I wouldn't do business with government. It's difficult. It's an asymmetric relationship. You have no power. Absolute third-rate clerk can rule your business. So, very asymmetric. Very dependent on who. So, some exits have happened. Then we did the school project. We exited that because we were doing government. We didn't want to do it at a certain level. But not all exits are done for that. We exit our most profitable business, which was software in 2019, EdTech, simply because that was not a personal priority. We were just more interested in education. And we used those funds, Vijay and me, partially to fund this place, and NIIT to now chart its next direction of growth. We have funds available, which we will use to do for growth. So in your plan, in fact, the interesting story is NIIT started with an acquisition. The guy who used to represent Advanced Systems at videotape company,
The Skillsoft of now.
he was a distributor of some technical books and of those videotapes, which he never sold any. And it's a long story, but the net of it was he was a retired IT head, those times EDP manager of ICICI. He kept. And he was doing this as a hobby. And we were seeing it when we bought his company. That was an interesting small acquisition, just to tell you. So make, buy, partner, those are modeled, and now they become much more a way of life, even in India. Earlier, people have too much emotional attachment to buy or sell and lose opportunities. So, and there are so many formats and structures available that if you say, okay, what's good for our customer? What's good for our shareholders? A couple of people are the important stakeholders. So you can see, or your employees. So for NIIT Tech, when we exited that, the private equity guys, we forced them to do something that they never do. We put a condition that the top 100 people can't be touched for a year. So the first thing they do is they change blah, 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 blah. So they said it's a deal breaker. We said, no deal. This or no deal. And the guys told us 1 year later that we kept quiet because nobody does this. We can't get into the situation. So we said, these people are important to us. They've been here. Our CEO had joined 2 years before. And so anyway, different formats can be done. That's the fourth point, fifth point. And I talked about entry and exit as well. So you have to see those as methods. Where to enter, where to exit. We haven't done too many exits. We've done one big exit, we've done many entries. But that's something we keep thinking about to say, yeah, what do we do with this business? Add something here. Right. So these are some things which informally were coming up as questions. I thought I'd just try and answer. So then 5 more minutes. Now there are more questions now. Yeah.
Couple. So when you had 3 centers, what did you do to generate demand, or what did you do to market?
He met me the other day, or who said should we do 4 more? I said get to 3.
No, I mailed you for that. I mailed you for that question.
Yeah. So what did we do and what did we?
What did you do to generate demand or market and generate awareness when you had 3 centers versus when you had 2,000? How did those channels open up?
So that's a very long story. Out of the 2,000, some were also called tiny centers, which had about 4 seats in the classroom.
Yeah.
So the Chandigarh guy, when expansion happened, said, I want to do sub franchise.
All of them wanted you to generate demand for them, right?
Yeah. So demand generation, no, but it was 2 parts. There was the brand promotion, which we did, but there was a feet on street work. So the Jamshedpur guy, his family was well known. His father was in the Tatas, but he had to, even before we signed on, the process of signing on was also very rigorous. We'd get X number of people, then we give them a presentation, then they have to do markets, then we shortlist, then we give them a business plan, they test out. They would know where every school is, how many students, every club, every college, where is the demand. So, in a sense, the responsibility of getting enrollments was our part. Okay, but the brand building was our responsibility. At that time, media was not expensive. It was routine for us that in every leading newspaper in the country, every year 2 or 3 or 4 full page ads would be there.
That you can only afford at scale. Yeah. So, for example, Times of India, 3rd page, top of the column, was booked 15 by 2.
15 by 2. 30
was booked for 25 years.
Same place.
Same place. So we strongly believe that if you see the word NIIT written at the same place every day, somewhere or the other, then your confidence, your recall, all those things get. So that was a deal we struck with who's now current. I think he's now retired. He became the executive director of Times of India after that. He was a young advertising executive. So I think those were issues. But most important thing that was the purpose of that ad was to get a footfall inside your center. Correct? I mean, so in your performance marketing sense, right? That was to get you the lead. We used to call it an inquiry, and then the counseling, and then you would counsel, and the person would agree. And after he agrees, you say, now you do an entrance test. Right? And then you say, no, sorry. I don't think we can do justice to you. All that used to happen. I have to tell you one very little story. I got a call. I'm in Bombay. I got a call saying in Hindi, Bombay Hindi, कल हमारा लड़का आएगा, उसका एडमिशन होना. I said, कौन बोल रहे हैं? भाव बोले हैं. Okay. We didn't care about Bhav. I mean, I knew who Bhav is, but Bhav bole. So he came. Obviously, the call was not good. We rejected him. I got a call. गलती कर रहे हैं आप बहुत बड़ा गलती कर रहे हैं. I said गलती आपसे गलती अगर हम उसको ले लेंगे तो हमसे गलती हो जाएगा, क्योंकि हम उसका पैसे का वसूल नहीं कर पाएंगे, तो नहीं कर पाएगा। भाव बोले, ऐसा नहीं, ये नहीं होगा। इसे आपका वो ब्राउन कलर का गाड़ी नीचे खड़ा है ना एक, वहां बच्चे खेलते रहते हैं, वो आपका गाड़ी स्क्रैच हो जाएगा, हटा लो वहां से गाड़ी। Meaning thereby, if you don't, and that evening I went, huge scratch across the car. But then it stopped. I mean, they knew up to where they could push. So one can hear that, and I remember I told Raji, this is the day we were waiting for, when somebody will scratch my car to get admission into NIIT.
Scratch all my cars if this happens today. I'll myself scratch my car. The demand is there today for us.
The other day we arrived, when we said, I think we have arrived, is when matrimonial ads started saying 26-year-old young fair ABCD looking for a GNIT. We said now GNIT has become a part of social.
So, in the similar story I have for my test center, if I book any prestigious exam, somebody will come to the office. अरे सर, छोरे का ब्याह हो जाएगा, जीवन बन जाएगा, आपने सेंटर बुक किया है, अगर कुछ हो सकता है तो. Same story, but nothing was scratch, obviously. लेकिन a soft way of saying that hard talk.
Yeah. It's very much. Okay, couple of quick questions. Any more?
How did you get to NIIT as the name?
There are stories to that also. Official and unofficial.
Some created stories, but the company form was called Pace Education. When we registered, private limited registered, but we had decided to use the term information technology. It was not in parlance, it was computer. And it was going to be national, so we called it National Institute of Information Technology. But then we couldn't use the word National Institute, that is not allowed, standalone. Like Hindustan people couldn't use to have the public sector. So we had to write National Institute of Information Technology, a unit of ABC. And then the logo which was created, because it's a long mouthful, was NIIT. Increasingly, we found that name at one step. We were using the full form for some time. Then, in what do you do in a 15x2 ad and so on and so forth. And then, when we listed, of course, we became NIIT Limited. And after that, so that's how.
That NIIT Unlimited.
Okay, one more question.
How NIIT technologies actually shape up so big, of course we're talking about NIIT education, but about that, बहुत मुश्किल होता है जब आप दो कंपनीज रन करते हैं, एजुकेशन और एक टेक्नोलॉजी. हाउ डिड यू एक्चुअली एबल टू हैंडल बोथ?
So when we look back at it, we can use the word managing a portfolio, not that we meant it. So for us, everything actually was just organic. So for example, each of the actions we took was just sitting and saying we have to solve this problem. And when we started NIIT, we talked about the technology. In fact, when we got the videos and people couldn't understand the English, then we put an overhead projector with handwritten note by a faculty member to summarize what was discussed to make sure everybody got it. That was the response to a problem, right? Then people come and say, "हमने और सीखना है." So we added another module. We kept responding to problems. And then we figured quite early on that if we are focused on outcome-based, because the phrase was learner-centered, objective-driven. That was the mantra we used. So this is the pedagogy. Learner-centered, objective-driven, outcome-driven. So then we realized it's very important for us to make it practical. And what we then started, we also started getting requests from companies whose employees were coming to say, there are 50 more where I came from. So we started corporate level. And there was a lot of curiosity in leaders, so we designed the top management program. And when we designed the top management program, they would say, well, this is fantastic. We again were very stubborn in some matters. Like, it's a 2-day program. Mr. CEO, if you come, we'll do it. Otherwise, no use. It's a waste of your money. And most of them were curious, but I remember one case of national meeting for NBCC, Construction Corporation of Construction. So the CEO had agreed, we were sitting, and we would tell them, look, these 2 days, please cancel everything. So day one, he started going in and out of government RSA department. So before lunch, I said that I don't think we'll continue the program. When he went for the first time. So I said, we can't honor the commitment. So we knew that if CEO is not in computerization, what happened? But lunchtime, there was a lot of hullabaloo. He said, no, I'll sit. I said, no. Not good. Better. Then they gave us a date and then they followed. So on some things, we were very gentle, but we said, like Vijay said, you are wasting your money. But when we were doing those programs, we were trying to look at a lot of methodology. What should the companies do? How should they form the IT organization? How should they? So it was becoming kind of quasi consulting. By then, we had also hired people who were very strong in the IT area. So that we came from there, we went into offering a consulting service. We built a methodology, a pedagogy, a whole method. And there was a time when the ads in the Computers Today magazine would be 5-6 of us, photograph and say, challenge these minds for your IT problem. That kind of outspoken. Because we were really working very hard. But then we were biggest recruiters of IIM grads, MBAs. Biggest in India, number one every year, largest number. Because they were the ones going into consulting. From consulting, then many of these companies said, okay, you've done this 2-day program, can you make us a plan? So we got into building 3 or 5-year plans. And then many of them said, it's easy to make a plan, can you implement? So that is actually how we got into the software development business. But then we went to US in 91, went to Singapore. Their client said, do something for us. So we got into software business. And then 90s, of course, was anyone who had something. So now, in the 80s, our learning business supported 2 businesses, which are not so profitable. One was a consulting business. It was profitable, but it was a lot of effort. And corporate training. Corporate training took us a decade and a half, 2 decades to make viable. So that retail business was funding. Post 1991, the software business started. That time, all businesses were growing, so everything was going, generating cash. 2001, at that time, the retail business took a massive hit because engineering colleges were happening, .com had happened. And by then, the international business, which we tried to do retail, didn't work out. B2C, too expensive, too brand. But the corporate business had started growing up from 91. So the international corporate business, which we now call the managed training services business, that was beginning to take off. And our software business was. So by then, the software business also was scaling up. And actually, at that time, we said, now this business become big enough to be separate. So we demerged and listed that in 2004 with the intention of exiting. So we held 24% of the equity, 25%, and listed that. And then we made actually many attempts to say, okay, now let's exit this business. We don't need it. But we didn't need the cash, so there was no compulsion. We almost signed something in 2008, and 2008 happened. Very close to 2013. But they were all generating cash. So, but that generated a lot of cash to drive the other businesses. And then only 2019, we got a very good exit. So it was, in a sense, on a path to it for quite a while. Intended.
One weird question, sir. So you went from 3 centers to 2,000 centers, and everybody had computers in them. And today also we know the banks are not considering these computers to be asset or put as a security. When you had that kind of, did any time idea incur that why don't you push them that computers should become even the assets from the bank perspective to put it as a collateral security? Did occur to you? I mean, because
Vijay gave the example that had happened.
If you are a running company, then computers are still financials, plant and machine. Only thing is the margin on that is very high. The reason is the minute you start using the computer, its value drops down.
Depreciation is very high.
So the life cycle is very short. So as NIIT, even today, when we buy computers, we buy them as assets, but we depreciate them in 2 years or
I remember that time computer was coming, supercomputer, the bigger side. And
No, those
had all that values. And all.
supercomputers and all those bigger computers, the minis, well,
Yeah.
were never here, but the minis or mainframes,
Yeah,
mainframes also hardly any, but minis, those were funded. They were plant and machine. Always.
Okay, so we'll close.